There. So today we are going to be talking about Powder by Tobias Wolff. So you might want to go ahead and pull up the story so you can refer back to it. I like to pull this story because it gives us a good opportunity to talk about characterization, juxtaposition, and continue our conversation on symbolism. So just kind of moving forward, it's interesting as we look at the father character in the story. He is not what we would usually think about for a father figure. He is a little bit reckless, maybe a little immature. At times he is unaware or possibly just unconcerned with some of his son's anxieties over what's happening. Pull this quote here. He'd had to fight for the privilege of my company because my mother was still angry with him for sneaking me into a nightclub during his last visit to see Thelonious Monk. And this passage is important because it tells us a few things about the father. He's a jazz fan, and jazz is all about improvisation, not really having a plan, just going with the flow, enjoying it in the moment, which is very much how the father lives his life. But it also tells us about how he's willing to break rules. He sneaks his son into a nightclub, obviously without the mother's consent because she's angry about it. So jazz is a symbol here, and it enables us to understand all of those essential facts about the father. Wolff is able to characterize him as being impulsive without just having to say he's impulsive. You can also refer some of the father's actions in paragraph 18, the one I pulled here, where he says, come on, he said, though not to me. A little while later, he said it again when the trooper's car went past, lights flashing. He got up and dropped some money on the check. Okay, vamonos. This is a moment that sometimes students misunderstand. The dad gets up and he makes a phone call. Our speaker thinks he's calling the mother to explain he's going to be late. And then he comes and he sits back down, and the dad's a little bit agitated. He's, come on. They see the cop car go by, and the son realizes who the father called. He called the police. He created a diversion so that they could get around that barricade. That recklessness, that lack of concern is alarming, especially when you think about what he's showing his son. He wants to go around a barricade. He wants to go down this mountain, which is incredibly dangerous, and he's going to take his child with him. So why does the father take that risk? It could be in part because he's trying to show his son how to kind of live on the edge a little bit. Our son here is characterized as being very reserved, maybe a little bit timid. He's very organized. He's very structured, very type A. And he wants his son to loosen up a bit. They have a unique relationship, this father and son, and it's obviously strained to some point. The father cares for the son. That's why I pulled this passage here where he cranks up the blower. He makes sure he's warm enough. He wants to provide for his child, but then he also takes him down the mountain in this very dangerous way. At one point, the son says, what are my strong points? And the dad says, don't get me started. It'll take all day. And this is either a deflection in which the father doesn't really know how to answer that question. He doesn't know what his son's strong suits are, or he just really thinks so much of his child, so much of his son, that he can't just pinpoint one. Perhaps he is enamored with his child and he's just fascinated by everything the child does. Kind of depends on how you want to characterize the father and how you want to see him. Our son is characterized as being a complete opposite of his father, where dad is charming and charismatic and kind of boisterous and reckless and dangerous and thrill-seeking. Our young man is very sullen. He is very reserved. He's very uncomfortable with his father's freewheeling style, where the father is willing to move the barricade and get around it and break the law. The son is the kind of child who hangs his clothes on numbered hangers, who asks his teacher ahead of time for extra work. He's overly dependent on planning, on structure. He fears the unexpected. He fears uncertainty. And this leaves for a life with no spontaneity, with no surprise. So where the father probably has too much spontaneity and not enough adult control, our son has too much control and not enough impulsive behavior. Wolf is suggesting that you can't live in these extremes. You have to have a little bit of both. I mean, it's no wonder that the son is absolutely terrified, right? If he is if he's focused on control, if that's important to him, he's going down this mountain. He looks at the snow on the road. He knows the danger. He can't see what's in front of him. And in that moment, he's completely terrified because he has no control. The father, on the other hand, loves it. He loves not having the control. Mom is interesting because we only get to meet her, I say that loosely, in the peripheral, meaning in the way that the son characterizes his mother. We know something about her in that mom and dad are separating, that mom is probably more on the structured, controlling, strict side of things, especially if she didn't want the father to take the son to see Thelonious Monk or into the nightclub. Perhaps that's what's leading to their separation as well. Maybe dad's freewheeling lifestyle or impulse is becoming a problem in the relationship. There's also this image of mom sitting at home, waiting for the son to get back, waiting to light the candles, waiting to have dinner. It's very much this image of someone who adheres to order and a sense of normalcy, whereas the father, again, is completely opposite. They're definitely a troublesome match here, okay, where they're again two extremes. So this is where we want to talk a little bit about juxtaposition. And this is a literary term and a literary device where an author will take two things that are contrasting and put them side by side. The effect being a commentary on those extremes. So the father being this kind of wide open, wild thrill seeker, put right next to his son, who is very structured and organized and maybe even possibly dealing with some obsessive behaviors or anxiety behaviors. Putting those two together amplifies the extremes they both live in. So these are some examples here. Like I like the idea of the Les Mis poster paired with the Jack Nicholson from The Shining, or these two hands kind of reaching out to touch each other. Two contrasting images put together. Other juxtapositions in Powder, because we have the father and the son, we have the father and the mother. There's also the juxtaposition of the cold outside and the warmth inside. Those two things are certainly contrasting with each other. And the contrasting concepts of safety and security with recklessness. There's a quote here where the son talks about how the father is indifferent to his fretting. And he says indifferent. I don't necessarily love that because I don't think the father is unaware. I don't think he's unaffected by it. I think he's choosing to just overlook it. He knows his son is bothered by this, and that's part of why he's doing it. He's pushing his son beyond his comfort level. But Wolf writes, snow whirled around us in bitter, blinding squalls, hissing like sand, and still we skied. As the lift bore us to the peak again, my father looked at his watch and said, Criminy, this will have to be a fast one. So this imagery is interesting, this very dark, frightening imagery of the bitter, blinding squalls, hissing, and then that shifts into a sense of urgency. Okay, so here we have this excitement, this urgent excitement that it's something very dangerous, it's something very concerning, and yet the father is unaffected by that. In fact, he's encouraged by it. Like, we're going to have to ski this one quickly, we're going to have to go down this quickly because we don't have a lot of time. And in literature, this is where we see the concept of a foil. So foils are characters whose personalities and attitudes contrast sharply with another. Two characters who juxtapose together. So where we have the father who is excited, he is ready to go down this quickly, he's looking forward to the thrill of it. The son is using words like bitter, blinding, hissing. He's terrified. So again, these two men are put together. I also want you to think about the juxtaposition of snow versus powder. So in the story, snow is a visible obstruction. It's blinding. He can't see what's ahead. It represents the unknown. It's something you can't plan for in our story here. Whereas powder has the connotation of being soft, and fresh and unspoiled. Maybe fresh beginnings, like a new relationship with his father. It's also a fresh coat, right? It's covering up all the old tracks. It's covering possibly all the old habits and old feelings. It also presents a good grip for the driving, where snow, packed ice is dangerous. Powder enables them to go and do these kind of illicit behaviors. It certainly represents for the father making his own way, doing something that he probably shouldn't be doing, but the reason he wants to do it is a good one. And it presents challenging but rewarding skiing. And for the father, the powder is worth the challenge. It's worth the excitement. It's worth the joy of it. And possibly even it's worth pushing his son out of his comfort level. So these two types of weather are contrasted here and juxtaposed here. We also have some irony in our story. Of course, we know that irony involves a difference between appearance and reality, or a discrepancy between what's true and what appears to be true. So if we think about where there's some irony in the story, there's certainly some irony in the end with the father-son relationship. Wolf writes, "He was a great driver, all persuasion, no coercion. Such subtlety at the wheel, such tactful pedal work. I actually trusted him. And the best was yet to come, switchbacks and hairpins impossible to describe, except maybe to say this: if you haven't driven on fresh powder, you haven't driven." So the irony here is that by the end of the story, not only is he enjoying their illicit activity, but he comes to trust his father. The irony of trusting his father through something dangerous is interesting here. I actually trusted him, which makes it sound like before he did not trust him, or he questioned the trust that he had in his father. Now we can infer that that trust is there. And while it may not be something he feels often, he does in the moment feel it. And so we can see where this marks a change in the father-son relationship, where in the beginning the boy is sullen and scared and timid. By the end, he's joyous and he's recommending this activity. There's also an ironic role reversal here, where in the beginning, the father is the reckless, wild, impulsive, childlike character, and our son is mature, very organized, very structured, very concerned with right and wrong. So it's ironic because we expect those roles to be reversed. We expect children to be impulsive and adults to be the responsible ones. But also it's ironic because by the end of the story, those roles do reverse to a point. Our son, by the end of the story, is enjoying this activity. He's reveling in the excitement and the danger of the activity. And the father starts to become the one worrying about getting home. So we have that role reversal. We also see a literary device of a flash forward here, where most of the story is taking place as they're in the car or in the diner. Wolf does write, "What I did not know was that my father would wheedle and plead his way past them. He didn't sing O Tannenbaum, but just about that to get me home for dinner, buying a little more time before my mother decided to make the split final." So in this moment, Wolf is flashing forward to down the road when mom and dad do eventually divorce. And this is a non-linear plot development. It doesn't really play into what's happening in the moment, but it does show us that at some point, mom and dad's strained relationship here becomes a broken relationship, a fractured relationship. And near the end, he also flashes forward in the story to where they're stopped by the troopers, that they're going to get caught at some point. And dad seems to know they're going to get caught, and he's not bothered by that. So breaking the chronological order does a couple of things. One, it serves as, some plot development. It kind of tells us where the story is going to go even after the story ends. But it also helps us understand the gravity of what's happening within this family and better understand the importance of this moment for the characters. Some symbols, because we've been dealing quite a bit with symbolism lately. The roadblock is a huge symbol. This represents a symbolic threshold, and the boys need to cross into a form of maturity and adulthood. where he begins to admire his father's skill and finesse, and he begins to understand that while structure is great, planning is great, organization is life. I love being it, love organization. Not every aspect of our lives can be planned and organized and structured and detailed. That living an authentic life sometimes can be messy and sometimes means being able to go with the flow a bit. And y'all, to be honest, I struggle with that as an adult. But that is a part of our reality. Not everything is plannable or determined. So our young man here, in crossing the roadblock, he understands that he's crossing into a new part of his existence where there might be danger and there might be uncertainty, and that's going to be okay. That's part of the adventure of life. The powder is also symbolic in the story. It represents something fresh, a new beginning. This point in their lives, in the father and son's life, gives them an opportunity to kind of start anew in their relationship, which they're going to have to down the road when mom and dad split up. The father and son are going to enter into a whole new part of their relationship. So the powder is kind of enabling them to do that. Okay. The father's gift is also a symbol here. This is the father's Christmas gift to his son, and it's a gift in both an activity and time, because spending time with his son, taking his son to do something. But he's also trying to give his son a message. And this gift of it's like a knowledge gift, right? That it's okay to take chances and it's okay to take risks and it's okay to follow your own path and not to be fearful. He's maybe concerned about his son's tendency to be obsessive or anxiety ridden. And he's trying to show him that you have to ease up a little bit. In this life, there are choices that have to be made and you can't pre-plan everything. So this is both a time gift, an activity gift, and kind of a life lesson from the father. Another theme in the story is anxiety. And our young man feels really almost a crippling sense of anxiety and uncertainty. The fact that he's able to conquer it by the end, though, tells us so much about his character and his growth in just this small story. And he may go home and continue to have issues with anxiety, but in this moment, he's able to let go. And in this moment, he's able to lean into the uncertainty and the fear. And perhaps that's what Wolf is trying to talk to us about or teach us about, that there are going to be times where we have to let the anxiety go and we have to be able to just enjoy the moment. And understand that can't go to the other extreme, like where the father is either, where he is never concerned about things. But again, just that kind of a little bit of a lesson there that maybe you can't always see what's ahead of you, but that doesn't mean that it's always bad, right? You guys are at a point right now in your lives where you're starting to look towards the future and figure out what you want to do and maybe where you want to go to college or what career you want to, look into. And with that uncertainty comes some anxiety. But I do want you to also realize that just because you can't see it yet, you can't put your finger on it yet, doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean that you aren't going to have an incredible future, because you absolutely are. There's also a theme of duality here. We have senses of both fear and awe. Driving in the snow, he does fear his father to a point, but he's in awe of him as well. There's fear and respect, too, between the son and the father. And I think ultimately, the father does come to respect his son's anxiety a bit, like his concern for the mother. By the end of the story, the father wants to get his son home. He wants to make sure his son is comfortable. We also have the duality represented in the separation between the father and the mother. There's a divided allegiance here for our young man. He wants to spend time with his father, but he also doesn't want to disappoint his mother. This also kind of hints to some divided time that's coming up, that once the parents split, our young man is going to have to make some very difficult choices. And with that may come different rules. And he may be living with two very different people and very different personalities. We also see duality represented between the son's comfort zone, which is home, and the obligation of going out with his father, right? And going out of his comfort zone. There's also the duality of Christmas tradition, what they always do, which is that dinner with the red candles, versus something new and exciting, and the way he feels obligated to do that with his father. Additionally, risk and reward, okay, the duality of those concepts. So that's a lot of, information for, again, a very short story. So just kind of remembering that just because something's shorter doesn't necessarily mean that it's not multi-layered or complex or, full of commentary and so, things like that. So go ahead and, if you will, take the little quiz on powder and have a great weekend.